Hello, good day and salutations. Welcome to the Perler Project. Today's video is very much a continuation of yesterday's video where we looked at Pokemon sprites, and I will go into a bit more detail in the creation of one of these larger sprites, where the problems and issues lie with this and what you need to look out for. If you haven't already watched the previous video I put out, I'll just recap by saying that the Pokemon games typically featured two types of sprites. They feature the icon sprites, which are very much small yet not very detailed Pokemon icons. They work better for certain Pokemon as opposed to others, but they are much easier to create, much smaller to create, and less of a hassle when creating these type of patterns. Today's design is actually based off the front view of a Pokemon in battle. It's actually based off the full Pokemon sprite, and as such it is much more detailed, much larger, and does require a bit more patience, a few more beads, and quite a lot more in terms of colour variety in order to get this one 100% right. I will start things off by mentioning that I have used two large oblong boards, and I've essentially clipped them together in order to create this design. The sprite that I'm actually working off is 96 pixels by 96 pixels. However, this also includes the white space around the actual Pokemon, which obviously does not need any beads to cover. The size of the Pokemon itself is much smaller than that. However, you do need to be prepared to have a few boards stuck together. If you don't have the large oblong boards, as I do, I suggest 4 large square pegboards should do the trick. I'm actually starting with the Pikachu design because, I guess this could also count as the trivia part of the video, but I'm starting with the Pikachu design because Pikachu is very much the Pokemon mascot. This probably is more true for the red, blue, green, yellow, and possibly even gold and silver games. I feel that the games after that, Diamond, Pearl, Black and White, don't necessarily feature Pikachu as their mascot, and in fact if we do look at the Pokemon franchise as a whole, I think Pikachu has somewhat moved away from being the forefront of the franchise. Definitely in the 90s when Pokemon was first released, Pikachu was the biggest character. I would probably say he's still the most recognizable Pokemon character, and definitely amongst the kids and mothers, it's a character that has stuck with the franchise and is representative of the franchise as a whole. This is quite funny actually, because Pikachu is very much a mouse-like creature. He is in fact a rodent Pokemon, and if you were to say to a mother that he is in fact a mouse or a rat, it'd be quite funny to see their reaction. Typically, rats and mice are not viewed as clean creatures, let alone creatures you want in your house. And yet, if you do talk about Pokemon, and if you do talk about what Pikachu actually stood for and how he was portrayed in the anime series especially, you will see that he is in fact in the house, he is around the people the whole time, he even eats people's food. So it's quite funny that they did choose a mouse-like creature. But having said that, if you do look at Pikachu, you could probably see aspects of a pet dog or a pet cat in there. In terms of colouring, Pikachu was chosen as a mascot initially because it was a colour, yellow, that appeals to both boys and to girls. There was no isolation of the gender, and children, young children, could definitely and easily recognise the colour and associate themselves to that colour. So definitely a very good mascot choice to get the brand name out there and to get the awareness out there. So well done to Nintendo on that front. In terms of some of the characteristics of Pikachu from the game, he is an electric type Pokemon. His cheeks essentially act as a storage base for electricity, and he would use various electric attacks to try and take on his enemies. However, the Pokemon was not limited to just normal electric attacks. Being a mouse type Pokemon, he is still very fast and could actually use quick attack with great success. Did so very much in the anime series as well as in the games themselves. Initially, Pikachu did not have a evolution or a pre-evolution. You could always evolve a Pikachu into a Raichu, but it wasn't until the Gold and Silver games, if I'm not mistaken, that Pikachu finally had a pre-evolution and comes from the Pichu Pokemon. We also see that when initially released, the Pikachu model was very much a chubby model. The sprite that I'm actually modelling at the moment is from the black and white games, and in these games Pikachu has in fact lost quite a bit of weight. If you compare this sprite to a sprite from red and blue, you'll notice that it's much leaner and looks more athletic than the Pokemon that was available to us in red and blue. Funnily enough, it's only in the black and white games that the Pokemon sprite has actually tied into what we were seeing in the anime series. So for the first few games, Pikachu was quite an obese little thing in the games, but in the anime series, as you can see, quite an athletic and lean type of Pokemon. Okay, well, we've looked at the trivia behind the game, and I've given you a bit of information on the Pokemon side of things, the game side of things. Now it is time to actually focus on the pattern itself. As you can see, this is quite a large pattern. The pattern itself probably is about 15 centimeters tall by probably 12 to 15 centimeters across. So it's not really a small pattern, and I did warn you before this began. This took about an hour and a half to complete, and I think that included ironing time if I'm not mistaken. I've used several colours which I had available to me, and they were black, grey, teddy bear brown, cream, yellow, white, red, burgundy, light brown, and dark brown. They're fairly standard colours if I'm honest. There wasn't too much in the way of trying to find a rare colour, and I feel that these colours are something that everyone will have to hand. I should point out that if you do have translucent black beads, then you could easily substitute the grey beads on the ear for translucent black. It would probably make the design look a bit more accurate and more in tune to what the sprite was showing, but because I didn't have those beads, grey substituted very, very nicely. Beyond that, I think the shading of the two different yellows, well, three different yellows if you include cream, was no problem. It allowed to differentiate the shadow on the Pokemon from the lighter areas on the Pokemon, so that much I'm happy about. And quite honestly, once you iron this all out, it looks much nicer than it does on the board. I don't have too many complaints and too many issues with this design. I think if I was to change anything, it would probably be the two black beads on the Pokemon's hand, on his right hand as we look at the screen. The reason for this is because while the sprite does have two black pixels there, upon further review and upon looking at the design once it's been ironed and completed, those two black beads don't necessarily fit in, and I'm not really sure why I didn't pick up on this earlier. Really, other than that, there wasn't anything complex about the design. What I would probably recommend if I was also to do this again was to move the design a bit further to the left so that the tail does not sit on the very edge of the board. This will just make ironing a tiny bit easier, but again, this isn't 100% necessary. You could very easily just leave it on the edge of the board if you so wish. Just be aware that you have to make sure you get the tip of the iron and make sure you iron those beads correctly so they stick. In fact, one thing I should point out about the ironing of this design, you have to be very careful, make sure every single bead sticks together. If you don't, when you flip this design over to take it off the board, things will fall out, and if they do fall out, the structural integrity of the design will weaken. While it is quite a strong design on the whole, if bits start to fall out, this is not going to be the case. Please also bear in mind that the tail is quite heavy, quite a large chunk of the design. What I would personally recommend is to try and stick corners of the tail to the main body, this way adding a bit more structural integrity to your overall design. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope we can see you for another Perler project soon.